You would think that the hardest part about being a project manager would be delayed schedules or overrun budgets, all of those things that are very process based. But actually, at least for me, the hardest part about being a project manager is having difficult conversations and dealing with conflict, which is basically just part of the job as a project manager. So you have to start getting comfortable with it. So today, I want to share how I deal with difficult conversations with conflict as someone who hates it because I am such a harmony-based person. I like to have fun at work. If we're not having fun at work, then I don't want to be part of the project. But obviously, that's just not realistic. I also have to deal with difficult conversations, and they are way more common than I thought they would be. They're basically on a daily basis at this point. But here's what I realized about difficult conversations or conflict. It's actually not always a bad thing. Having conflict really teases out all the potential problems in your project. It helps understand where maybe we need to look at something in detail, where potentially you could find places to do efficiencies. Maybe two disciplines are arguing with each other because one thinks that's more efficient to do something one specific way and the other one just disagrees and doesn't want to do it. And so it's an opportunity for you as a project manager to look into it and see if there's actually something there worth looking into and adopting on your project. Same thing with your client and your stakeholders. If there is a conflict, that means that there's something going on with the project that needs to be looked at. And if it's being brought up sooner rather than later, that's a really good thing for your projects. So I definitely like to spin it in a positive way because it just helps me kind of manage them better. It helps me understand that difficult conversations are important because if those issues are brought up early on, it really helps the project move forward. And if we can deal with it head on, it helps us not damage any of the trust among the team members, including the client and the stakeholders. And as I've mentioned many times before, trust is one of the key pillars of a successful project. So let me share with you some of the key strategies that I use to deal with difficult conversations. And then at the end, I'll go through difficult conversation samples and examples of how we can respond to each of those conversations. Okay, first things first, as it always is with me, I like to talk about the mindset shifts before I get into the technical strategies. Getting through difficult conversations means that you have to have a high level of emotional intelligence. For me, for example, I like to wear my heart on my sleeve. Unfortunately, that's just how I've always been. And so with difficult conversations, I get really flustered. And if I'm angry, instead of, lashing out in anger, I start crying. And I hate that about myself. So the first thing that I needed to do was detach my emotions, my personal feelings from a difficult conflict, a difficult conversation, or a difficult situation. That's why working on your emotional intelligence is so important because being able to detach your feelings from the situations will help you respond not impulsively. It'll help you think through the response that you're trying to give instead of reacting emotionally and providing the first response that comes through your mind, which is very likely not the right one. Working on your emotional intelligence will help you lead those conversations with a level head and a calm demeanor, which is what is needed for leadership. I once had a leader who was the most calm, stoic person I've ever met. Nothing could rattle this person. I would literally watch him be in leadership meetings where people were aggressively talking to him, almost to the point of being not professional. And he never responded with anger or with frustration. And he always responded calmly with the facts, with his point of view, and with why he thought whatever they were discussing or whatever they were arguing about wasn't correct. He was always so level-headed. And then after the meeting, we would chat and he'd be like, yeah, I was so mad. I would say, where? Why can't I just be like you? Where honestly, why can't I just be level-headed and just be able to talk through facts, through my stated opinion? It always made people, I wouldn't say feel uncomfortable, but it made them realize how flustered and their lack of emotional regulation that they had. And so by my leader being calm and collected and being able to discuss an issue in a very calm manner without being frustrated, without arguing with anyone, it made others try to be the same and try to be just as civil, which is one of the main ways that you know that a leader is influencing a room. But as much as I would love to be as calm and stoic as he is, that is just not who I am authentically. And as I've mentioned before, you want to lead in your authentic style. So bring in your personality when it comes to difficult conversations. Don't abandon yourself, but try to do it from a place of emotional regulation, a place of emotional detachment, making sure that you are not taking things personally and you're concentrating on the issue. This will help you move forward in a regulated manner, which you'll be able to actually respond and provide your input and opinion without everyone fighting and no one actually listening to each other. For me, I always try to lead the difficult conversation with harmony and a little bit of humor. Obviously, I try to make sure that I know my audience. If humor is not something that I want to be bringing to the table, then I take on a more serious tone. But I always try to make sure that I concentrate on the issue and the solution when it comes to difficult conversations. Okay, so let's break it down into actionable steps that you can actually do in a repeated basis to get yourself through difficult conversations. Number one, prepare. Do not go into a difficult conversation without preparing your input and your opinion. Always go prepared in with the data. Make sure that you stay grounded on the actual facts and the data of what is going on in this specific issue. Make sure you've actually looked into it and done your research, and you're not just speaking from a hearsay or from your opinion from a very small piece of information that you got. Make sure you're coming in prepared. Number two, lead with empathy. Do not assume negative intent. I think this is one of the biggest issues that I've seen in programs where I've had difficult conversations, where everyone comes in with the assumption that the other person is trying to do something to impact, you or the program in a negative manner, or that they're here for their own agenda and they only care about themselves. I've seen this happen time and time again, people coming in and not leading with empathy, not leading with the presumed assumption that everyone's here to ensure the success of a project. Which I find that when I do come into conversations where everyone has already made these assumptions, it means that we've already failed. When everyone is coming into the room with these predetermined thoughts, I know that we are not going to succeed in figuring out a solution to the issue. But when everyone comes in with an open mind, with empathy, with, a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, I know that we will be able to move forward with the project and succeed with the project, because it means that we'll be able to not only solve this issue, any other issue within the project is going to go well as well, because we can all work together to figure out a solution. Next up, with difficult conversations, I would avoid sugarcoating and not being direct. Make sure that you are direct in the kindest way manner without sugarcoating, because that vagueness can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. And it also leads to not improving, right? So when I'm talking about this, I'm probably talking about when you are having a conversation regarding underperformance, right? And you have to have those difficult conversations with someone and say, you're not performing in the expected manner, and we need you to take some steps to perform in the expected manner. Those are really, really difficult conversations that are very easy to sugarcoat, because you don't want to hurt the person's feelings, because you have a hard time having those conversations and being direct with people. You're used to just kind of avoiding the issue and coasting by and hoping it resolves itself. But you're actually doing everyone a disservice by sugarcoating and by not being direct, by being a little bit vague. I know that the strongest relationships that I've had with leadership has been when they've been very direct with me, to the point of probably I went to the bathroom and cried, right? But it was never unkind. It was always a very just straightforward, matter of fact feedback that I was receiving. And every time that I received sugar-coated feedback, I was always just confused. I didn't know how to move forward. And it's happened to me when I had to give critical feedback. I have definitely sugar-coated it and kind of talked around the problem without talking directly about the problem. And that led to a lot more misunderstanding and more months of difficult conversations. If I had just done it straight from the beginning, and, respected the person enough to give them the critical feedback in a direct manner, then I would have avoided a lot of issues. I see it as, if you're able to provide this direct feedback and continue a professional relationship, that professional relationship usually grows deeper when you're able to do this. Number 4, and I've already said this multiple times, but focus on solutions and do not focus on blaming. Do not play the blaming game. Pointing fingers, that never works. That never resolves anything. If anything, it just lowers the morale of your team. So just focus on the issue, figure out the steps that everyone needs to take in order to solve this issue without concentrating on blaming one discipline, blaming one person, blaming a process. Just figure out what the solution is and implement the solution. And my final one, just reiterating the mindset shift that I said at the beginning. Stay calm even if others aren't. This is going to be your superpower, and it's going to be really hard to develop this skill. But if you're able to stay calm even when others aren't, you'll be able to diffuse the situation, and you'll be able to influence others to realize that they are reacting in a very emotionally irregulated manner and that they're just escalating things. Meanwhile, you are here with a level head, trying to figure out a solution and de-escalating things. Okay, those are the 5 strategies that I try to adopt every time I go into a difficult conversation. I'm not perfect. These are just if I were an ideal project manager, these are the 5 things that I would do. Sometimes I do some better than others. Sometimes I just completely fail at them. But if I continuously grow, have that growth mindset, that means that I'm continuously improving as a project manager. Okay, let's go through some common situations that require difficult conversations, and we'll do some examples. Let me look at my notes. I tried to pull things from actual experiences so that you guys can see how I reacted to them in real time. Okay, first off, let's talk about stakeholder issues. Let's say that a stakeholder is not happy with the scope of the project. They thought they were going to get something additional, and it turns out that it didn't end up going into the scope of the project, that it got eliminated. So what they were promised is no longer part of it. They're obviously very angry, and they've brought that to your attention. How would you respond to that? First off, you always want to make sure that your stakeholders feel heard. So something to the effect of, I hear your concerns. I understand what you're saying. Let's talk through this together. You want to make sure that they know that you are not ignoring their input, that you're listening to them. And then you open up the conversation to further compromise. Can we discuss specifically what about the scope didn't work for you? Can we talk about a way that we can compromise if the issue was that there were constraints in the project that we were not able to deliver the scope within this scope of the project? And then you can talk the stakeholder through exactly why you were unable to add the scope that they were hoping into the project. And then hopefully they can understand where you're coming from, potentially find another way to make that stakeholder happy, or if not, at least communicate thoroughly why it is that you were unable to deliver what they were hoping. Sometimes stakeholders are very open to it and the conversation is easy. Sometimes it's much more difficult, and you kind of just have to stick to what are the constraints of the project, what is the scope of the project, why were we unable to deliver that specific scope. Here's what we can offer you. Here's what we cannot offer you. If they're happy with it, then you can move forward. If they're unhappy with it, at least you were able to communicate. So those are always difficult conversations, and they're always very awkward because the stakeholder does have some sort of impact and influence on your project most of the time. And yet a lot of the times you're having difficult conversations with each other. Okay, next example. I already kind of mentioned this, but a team member is under-delivering, they're underperforming, they're not providing the expected quality of work that you have for them. And on top of all of that, they're not meeting their project deadlines. So as a project manager, you have to go and talk to them now. My style of project management, I like to come in with an open conversation, an open question to allow them the space to provide a reasoning over why they're not meeting their deadlines, right? So something to the effect of, I noticed that your task is delayed and they've been delayed a couple of times. Can you kind of walk me through what's blocking you from being able to deliver them on time? That helps me lead the conversation with a little bit of empathy, a little bit of you tell me what's going on, so that we can walk through the issue and hopefully find a solution together. I might be a little bit on the softer side. I know there's definitely project managers that lead the conversation a little more directly, something to the effect of, you are missing deadlines. This is what you committed to. Please stop missing those deadlines, rather than trying to understand what's going on. That's just not my style, and everyone has their own. But I definitely learned my lesson. Going back to my example, I really thought that I nailed having that difficult conversation with an underperformer, and that we had figured out a solution to move forward, and that person was going to be able to deliver. And as it turned out, I did not nail it. She wanted to call HR on me, and it was my first time really learning that vagueness does not help you. You really need that directness, even if you're going to be kind. Be direct. Another example of a conflict conversation in project management could be potentially communicating to the client that their scope creep is starting to impact the schedule and the budget. Sometimes clients do push for some scope creep, and some projects can absorb a little bit of scope creep, but when they start impacting the success of a project in terms of schedules and budgets, that's when you need to go and have that difficult conversation with the client. Sometimes clients are very open to them and agree, yes, I agree, that wasn't in the scope. Let's get a change order in. Other clients disagree and they think, you know what, I do think that's part of the scope and I think you need to be able to absorb it in a schedule. So you need to be able to come to a client prepared for both situations. If obviously you're getting to a point where it is impacting your schedule and your budget, my common go-to phrase is, okay, if we're going to add this, it's going to impact our schedule and our budget. And I show them how it's going to impact the schedule and the budget. Which one is your priority and which one would you like to adjust? That doesn't give them the option of saying, no, it won't impact anything. It tells them that, you know what? Either one is going to be impacted. Which one is your priority? Because no matter what we do, one of those is going to get impacted. And if you come prepared and show them how it's going to get impacted, then that's how you are concentrating on the facts and delivering your argument. Okay, last example. Let's say that there is a conflict within the project team. Let's say there's a conflict between two disciplines. Here, same thing. I try to concentrate on the solution. And I try to make sure that they both feel heard, that neither party feels like the project manager is on either side, right? So I always try to concentrate on the success of the project. It could sound something like, hey, I hear both of you. Both of you have brought valid arguments, but here's the goals of our project. Try to refocus them back to the goals of your project and how to succeed. How can we work together to make sure that we deliver those goals? And usually when I can get them to concentrate on the goals of the project, they are able to start compromising with each other and start figuring out a solution with each other. Sometimes when we aren't able to find a compromise or figure out a solution forward together, then I do have to use my PM authority and figure out what is the solution and say, hey, I know both of you aren't happy, but this is the solution that will help us succeed with our project. So we're going to move forward with this and we'll circle back to the other thing next time. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget that I do have a project management course. If you want to learn more about it, I'll leave a link down below and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.